Hi guys, so today's video is the final spoilery chat for Rhythm of War. We are going to be going over part 5 and the 3 interludes right before that. There is a lot to unpack with this ending, so just jumping right into it. The first interlude of this section follows Hesina, Kaladin's mom, and this one... So obviously I had already read the entire book by the time I was starting these chats, and it was really difficult because I was so frustrated with Renarin throughout a lot of this book, but it was hard to... I mean, I could easily tap back into that frustration going back and reading the passages where Liren's like, "You're a monster now," and stuff like that to Kaladin. But when you get this part, and I was like, gosh darn it, Sanderson. Because when she is talking to Liren, Hesina, and she says to him, "I want you to appreciate your incredible son," and he says he was supposed to be better than this, he was supposed to be better than I am. Liren, you can't keep blaming yourself for Tian's death. Would he be dead if I hadn't spent all those years defying Rashon, if I hadn't picked a fight? I knew that he was projecting onto Kaladin, but having it verbalized in that way, just, you know that Kaladin has always blamed himself for his brother's death, and I feel like we've never really seen such an open and exposed version of Liren blaming himself for his son's death. It's of course sad to have a brother feel like it's his fault, but to have a father think that his son died because of him, and he just so badly doesn't want Kaladin to go in that same direction, it puts things in a slightly different perspective. I don't have much to say about the Aiden point of view, except for the fact that I remembered very vividly who this character was, even though they showed up way earlier in the book, back in part 2, I believe. So I feel like that's kind of a compliment to Sanderson's ability to give such voice to characters, that he can have some random kid, although there aren't very many kids, but still, this random kid can show up again, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I know who this kid is. As usual, in the next interlude, Taravangian being sad and crying makes me sad. But there's this one, Shah Anat, this one part when she's speaking to him, and she says, "The god, she touched 3 that I know, the child, the general, and you, the old magic, the night watcher. I begin to wonder if it was all a cover these many centuries, a way for her to secretly bring in people she wanted to touch. She's been playing a far more subtle game than Odium realized." So I have seen some people predicting that Taravangian, Dalinar, and Lift are going to be the individuals to all take on the shards. Obviously, if you're watching this, you know Taravangian, what happens with him, which we'll get to. But I have seen some people thinking that this might be the way it's going down, so I'm very curious if you have any of your own theories, and if you think there's significance to the fact that Lift and Dalinar are mentioned here. Jumping now into part 5 officially with chapter 98 and Dalinar. Now that we're back with him and Szeth here, one thing in this particular chapter that stuck out to me is just a world building detail that I absolutely loved. It's a really minor thing, but when Szeth looks and sees that the herald, it says, might be Shin, Dalinar understood. He'd seen many depictions of all 10 heralds, and they were usually all painted as Alethi. You had to search the masterworks of earlier ages to find depictions of the heralds representing all the peoples of Roshar. I love that world building detail, because that is so accurate. Back with Yasna and Wit in chapter 99, and I did not think I needed this duo, but I love them together, not necessarily romantically, although that is interesting also, but I think a lot of the theories people had about Yasna are being proven here in this chapter, but I just love them together. Chapter 100, we see Kaladin preparing for the fight, so we're getting ready to go. I don't have any specific things from this chapter that were particularly impactful, just we're getting ready. And then in the next chapter, there was something that I really, really loved. Once again, it's a smaller thing, and I know we have big stuff to discuss in this part, but it's the little details that I really, really like. And I really appreciate in books when there are moments where characters are reflecting back on things that have occurred in the past. And there's a part with Dalinar where they assume there's no way Kaladin has a chance, And I really loved this part where Dalinar is thinking, because Yasna tells him, with all due respect to him, Kaladin is just one man. And then he thinks she was correct, of course. Common sense dictated that one man was nothing against an army of fused, yet Dalinar wondered. Once in the war camps, he'd argued with Kaladin's soldiers who had set up a vigil for the young Windrunner, then presumed dead. Dalinar had been proven wrong that time. Now he found himself possessing some of the same faith as those soldiers. I really love that we get this reference back to book 1, and it's all kind of coming full circle. And I like that Dalinar now is kind of like a believer in the fact that Kaladin is always doing the impossible. In the next chapter, when we're back with Navani, I wanted to point out another passage that I thought did such a fantastic job of showing Navani's imposter syndrome, because here she is discovering this amazing discovery, and yet because of the negative consequences of it, she's now questioning herself and her intelligence and her worth all over again. And there's this passage that I think just displays this so well, where she says, "You don't dare take that distinction for yourself. If she'd been a scholar, she'd have understood the implications of her work. She was a child playing dress up again. A farmer could stumble across a new plant in the wilderness. Did that make him a botanist?" I just think that's so well done, and it's after everything she's accomplished in this book, even though it kind of is not looking so good for them at this very moment, and I understand her being bummed about that. Also, I just think Navani is just so well written in this book. Also, as much as we all, not all of us, some people actually like Moash still, but as much as a lot of us hate Moash, I gotta say, I really liked this moment. I mean, I hate this guy, but still, I really liked this moment when she's like, "You're terrible," and he is kind of like, whatever. And he says, "Roshon killed Kaladin's brother. You could have stopped it if any of you cared. You were never my queen. You are nothing to me. You are nothing to anyone. You don't speak to me of treason or friendship. You have no idea what this day will cost me." All of chapter 103 is just so much tension. You're like, no, come on. No, Moash doesn't get to kill another person again, does he? And so I was not particularly happy with that part, because I'm like, no. And then, of course, we all know where it goes, but we'll get there. And then the following chapter, chapter 104, okay, it's so frustrating because there's this whole huge, awesome boss fight, basically, between Kaladin and the Pursuer, but that is clouded by the fact that there's this ominous impending doom for Tef, so it's like hard to appreciate how cool this fight is. But I gotta say, when Kaladin starts just like yelling at him that he's defeated, the defeated one, I loved it so much. And the part where he says, "I am death itself, defeated one, and I finally caught up to you." That line was so cool. I thought that was gonna be my favorite line of the book. It's not. Navani wins. You all probably know which line it is. But Sanderson, of course, has to keep us in this moment with Teft. And it says, Teft was forgiven. Teft was forgiven, and he was close. And this part, I was like, dude, you're not going to do this again, are you? You seriously doing this again? And then when he sees his friend get stabbed, and you're like, no. But then, I'm sorry, I'm just like squeaking and making noises. But when the whole thing with Moash, this whole last part, where he says, "There was always a part of me that resented how you were so eager to follow him, right from the start, his little axe hound licking his feet. He loves you. I thought I'd have to use his father, but I am satisfied to have found something better." And then Tef says, "You're a monster," because he is a freaking monster. And he says, "I am no monster. I am merely silence, the quiet that eventually takes all men," which is an obnoxiously cool line for how much I hate him, but that was pretty cool. But then, Teft, when he says, "Tell yourself that lie, Moash, but know this, you can kill me, but you can't have what I have. You can never have it, because I die knowing I'm loved." And then, confident and somehow still full of hope, Teft died. Ugh. I gotta say, I always hated Moash. I hated Moash from the very beginning, and Kaladin was like, "This guy is like the only guy that like treats me like a normal person, so he's my best friend out of all the Bridgemen." And I was like, dude, this guy sucks. I don't like this guy. I don't like his attitude. I don't think you should, in Words of Radiance, be like, "Hey man, sure, I'll maybe kill the king with you," and just all that. I was always like, Kaladin, stop it. Moash is clearly not a good guy. And then to have him be like, oh, you were always licking Kaladin's feet. And I'm like, you always sucked. You always sucked, man. That's what, I mean, Teft's last words were better than mine. Also, I thought it was kind of cool that just right before this, Yasna had been talking to Dalinar about hope and like, I hate hope. And I don't know. I thought it was kind of an interesting contrast to have then this moment with Teft. And you also have in the interlude where you see the hope that Kaladin is giving people. It's kind of like the hope is what is keeping Urithiru alive at this point. And it's also what allowed Teft to kind of die somewhat peacefully. Chapter 105, my notes for this chapter is more of Moash sucking. And I have a specific line where I'm just like, you are the worst. When he's talking to the pursuer and he says, this is Stormbless's father. Don't draw Kaladin's attention. His father is insurance. Kaladin has huge issues with the man. If Kaladin somehow regains his senses, immediately kill his father in front of him. Like, dude, how do you say that you're not a monster? He just got done saying he wasn't a monster. In chapter 106, slightly switching gears here and going back to Navani, when she is talking to Rabaniel and Rabaniel was tricked and everything, and I really liked this line from Navani where it says, I'm sorry, Navani said through gritted teeth, I'm sorry, but next time, try not to be so trusting. Kaladin going into rage mode after that, though, when it said his eyes, that they swore they were getting a yellowish red cast to them, I was like, no, you're not gonna take our baby away from us. When he rips the head off of the pursuer, I was like, that is an amazing way for him to go. Kind of combining chapters 107 and 108 together, the scene with Tien and Kaladin says, I'm not strong enough. And he said, you're strong enough for me. I'm not good enough. You're good enough for me. I wasn't there. You are here for me, Cal. You're here for all of us. Oh, man, that whole part is so sad. And then on the very next page, when Syl says, I've forgotten the words. I'm supposed to help you, but I can't. And then Kaladin says, I'm just like reading to you guys the whole last chunk. When it says, you are helping, Kaladin said, by being here. And then he says, besides, I know the words. And then it's Tien telling him, say them. And I liked this difference, instead of it being like Syl being like, go, Kaladin, say the words. And it having Tien being the one. I can't even speak coherently. This whole last thing is so emotional. Also, it doesn't give a specific dialogue tag, but obviously, say it, lad, do it is not Tien. It's Teft. Ugh. He just died, but he's still rooting Kaladin on. In chapter 109, after Venli has revealed herself to be all radiant and to be bonded, and then I think when Leshwi says, do they know of an honors friend named Rhea? She was my friend once, precious to me. Oh, that was so sweet and also kind of unexpected. And then in the next chapter, we get the best line in the book. Journey before destination, you freaking butthole. That line was so good. Oh my gosh. I like, as soon as that line happened, I was like, where are my tabs? Because that line is so good. You'll have to let me know. Is there any other line better than that line for you in this book? That line is so good. It's one of those lines where I feel like maybe you wouldn't actually say that, but it doesn't matter. It's just so cool. I don't even care if it's realistic or not. It's just the coolest line. Ugh, Navani wins. She wins for this book. And then right after that, when Kaladin saves his dad and his slave Bran goes away, and that whole last moment, like I said, I feel so bad that this whole last chat is just me squealing and reading to you. But when it says, he found scabs flaking away, the brands falling off to the stones below like a shell outgrown, discarded. Clean, smooth skin was left behind. Kaladin reached to his forehead in shock. And then when Lirin says, careful, son, I'm not a radiant. We mortals break, because he embraces his father tighter. And then Kaladin says, radiants break too. We need to protect the people in the tower. You in your way, me in mine. It's such a good moment, because it's like this moment of healing. Obviously, his depression's never going to go away, but it's this moment of healing, even after this horrifying thing that just happened with Teft, and there's still work to be done, but this beautiful moment of him having this weight lifted off his shoulders, and then having this beautiful moment with his father where they seem to finally kind of understand one another. It's so beautiful. In the next chapter, we get a wonderful Renarin moment when it says, "Keep fighting. Salvation will be, Renarin listener, bridger of minds. I have been sent to you by my mother at the request of Renarin, son of Thorns. I have watched you and seen your worthiness. Speak the words and do not despair." So it seems like the question of who Renarin had been thinking of was answered. A little bit later, we go back to Dalinar and Ishar, if that's how you say it, and I thought this was really interesting because this kind of confirms what the heck was happening with Kaladin and Tien, where, I'm assuming anyway, it says, "Perhaps you can restore me for a short time after an ideal is spoken near me. Everyone sees a little more clearly when a radiant touches the spiritual realm." So, because I mean, I think that's what most of us were thinking was happening, but I'm pretty sure that this confirms it unless he's talking about something else. I do think this is really interesting though, because from the other Cosmere books that I've read, it would seem there are some things with the spiritual realm that it's very difficult to kind of access. And so I think it's fascinating that the Radiants might have the ability to access it. There were so many great things in this chapter that in my notes I wrote Kaladin and Shard play with an exclamation point. I also wrote Spren experiments. WTF? What the heck? What the heck is going on? I've seen very few people discussing this, and I want to know what is happening with that part, because the Stormfather is like, "Oh, an abomination," and he's freaking out, and it's creepy. It's super creepy. I mean, I was pretty sure when I was reading this, I was like, that sounds like a cryptic, and then when they're realizing, and obviously you guys know what happens in that part, but I want to know what is going on. What is going on with that? If any of you have better things to say than WTF, then please feel free, because I would love to know if you have any predictions as to what that is leading to. I also wrote Moash is blind, not Odium's champion, because I think there was a lot of speculation that that's who Odium would have be his champion. I always thought it would seem a little too obvious to have it be Moash. I think now though that he is blind, I don't know if it's permanent, but I would think that kind of takes him out of the equation. So now I really want to know. I have to say, to kind of have a little fun with you guys here, when I made my theory video for, discussing all the different possible who is going to be Odium's champion theories, I had quite a few people that were basically like, "This is stupid, you're dumb, this is already dealt with, Dalinar isn't going to be his champion, it's over." And I was just like, okay, all right, sir. And, it would seem not the case, as that's basically what Book 5 seems like it's going to be all about. In Chapter 112, we have, obviously, Odium and Dalinar agreeing on the terms. And really quick, for anybody who is like, what? Who is that? When Odium says Sephandrius, that's another name for Wit and Hoid. You probably could have figured that out with context, but in case you're like, who is that? It's Wit. I don't have a ton to say about the deal that they make, but it's one of those scenes that I think a lot of us are going to be going back through and trying to pick apart to see what possibly could be twisted and misrepresented. I found Navani with Rabanyul. I thought that whole thing was done so well. They may be one of my absolute favorite, I keep saying it, but they're one of my favorite pairings of hero and villain that I've ever come across in any form of fiction, whether it's a video game, a TV show, a movie, or a book. I absolutely love the two of them. And the note, I don't know why it didn't quite get me the first time I read it, but when I went back and I looked at this again, the note that she leaves with Rabanyul where it says, "Do not dispose of this hero's body without first consulting the queen." I'm getting choked up even reading that. Rabanyul was a hero. And then, of course, we get the big thing at the end of this book. I do think there were some clues laid out, and I wasn't expecting this when I went into this book, but, I figured there was always something Taravangian has been being built up and built up and built up. I was pretty sure he wasn't just gonna, die of old age or something. So I wasn't expecting this to happen. I feel like everybody was like, Dalinar will take up a shard. And then it's like, just kidding, Taravangian's gonna be Odium now. But I have to show you all something. So this paperback copy is the ARC. And my ARC... Okay, at like one of the most pivotal moments in the book, what do you guys see? What happened? I could not read that passage, and I was like, what is he saying? It's like one of the most intense parts of the book, and there's like words on top of each other, and so now I have an actual copy now, so I can always go and go and look. But when I was reading it, I was like, what is happening right now? And I couldn't tell if it was like a stylistic thing where it was supposed to be all crazy. It's not. I was panicking. Chapter 114. There's something when we're talking about Teft's funeral, and Kaladin and pretty much everyone from Bridge 4 was there except for Rock. And there's a certain wording. The way it's worded, does anyone else think that this is a little bit more heavy? It doesn't... Okay, so I'm just going to read it. This part where it says, all of Bridge 4 came except for Rock. Scar and Drahe had relayed the news after returning to the Shattered Plains. It seemed Kaladin wouldn't be seeing Rock again. It could have just been like, Rock can't make it. But that wording makes me think that there's more going on with Rock, and that it's just, Sanderson's just keeping it to himself right now. Did anybody else read that and think, I don't know, there seems like there's more to that than you might expect. Also, just shortly after that, we see Syl standing full size in a Bridge 4 uniform. I love that. And it says Syl landed beside him, fully sized in a Bridge 4 uniform. He could faintly feel her when she rested her head on his shoulder. A lot of this book, it feels like, is her becoming more human in a sense. And I don't know, do you guys think maybe I'm just crazy, but do you guys think there's something to when Syl ends up choosing to be full-sized? Because it's always these really significant things. There's that moment in Way of Kings where Kaladin, I think it's the Way of Kings, where Kaladin looks and she's standing there. I think it's the first time he sees her standing, looking like a normal human-sized being. So maybe I'm just reading into this too much, but I don't know. I mean, like, what's happening with Syl? What's going on with Syl? Because she's feeling all this pain now, too. And Kaladin's like, we'll have to figure out what's going on. And she's like, I think I'm just becoming more real. And it's sad, but it's part of life. And I'm just like, is that all that's happening, though? Chapter 115. So earlier in this book, when Shallan got the little cube, I was like, oh, is this a reference? I promise this isn't a spoiler. I'm not spoiling things from the other Cosmere books. I have seen people drop spoilers for the other Cosmere books so casually, and I'm like, what are you doing? Anyway, this isn't a spoiler, this is just a thing. So there are things called Scions or Seons, I'm not sure how they say it, but they're in Elantris, and so when Shallan got this cube, I was like, oh, is it a Scion? And I tabbed it, and I was like, I bet this is a Cosmere reference, and then it just straight up says it in this part. I was like, darn it, I felt really good about myself. It said, no one here recognized the variety of Spren, but Wit called it a Scion, and I was just like, I thought it was clever. We see in this part that Shallan has let Adolin know all of her secrets. And in an earlier chat, I did mention, I had already tabbed, everything that I tabbed in this book, I tabbed while I was reading it. And I mentioned in a previous chat that I felt like Shallan and Adolin, they're very accepting of, well, more so Adolin, anytime that Shallan's like, by the way, this thing happened, I did this. And he's always like, aha, and then doesn't care. And I wish we had seen, maybe other people don't care, but I always feel like we kind of gloss over the moments that I think would help me see Adolin and Shallan as more, I feel like we would get more depth between them, because I know a lot of people don't care about their wedding, but it was like, by the way, they got married at the end of Oathbringer, and you're like, I guess they're married now. And then I find this moment where I wanted to see her tell Adolin, especially because of the significance that would have for her to finally tell him all of this. I think it would have been a really wonderful moment for us as the reader to see, and to see her and Adolin having this conversation and see how Adolin processes all of this. But instead, it's just kind of like, you did eventually tell me your secrets. And then she's talking to Mraize, and she's like, telling him like, I've chosen a side and whatever, and which is great for her. But she says, I have what I need, thank you very much, she said, as Adolin put a comforting hand on hers. And I'm like, I'd be maybe like a little salty that my wife kept this really giant secret from me that is honestly kind of a big deal. The Ghostbloods are kind of a massive deal. So I don't know, is anyone else a little disappointed that we didn't get that scene? Or are you guys like, no, it's fine? I would have liked to have seen it. Right after that, we get the reveal that I feel like a bunch of people are freaking out about. Some people are dropping like it's nothing, which please, I know that reveal is really exciting and a lot of us want to talk about it. If you want to talk about this reveal, write spoilers in your comment and then we can chat. But because this is a huge spoiler for other books in the Cosmere, I don't want... I feel bad that so many people have already been spoiled for it, but hopefully we can avoid that here. If I see you spoiling this for people without writing spoilers, I'm really sorry, but I'm just going to delete your comment because I don't want to ruin other people's experiences when they go into the Cosmere. So please avoid saying the character's name that most of us think is being referred to in this moment. It is really exciting. The end of this chapter for me was the reason that I think I personally did not mind the flashbacks in this book so much. So many people, I think, have been quite disappointed in these flashbacks. I haven't minded, one, because they were very, very brief, and also there weren't very many of them. So I didn't mind, especially because this moment at the end of this chapter, when I told you guys in the previous chats, the thing that stuck out to me the most in all of the flashbacks was their mother, Jaxlim. And so when Venli finds out that she's alive and she talks to her and she sings to her, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. And then when her mother at the end says, Venli, is that you? Venli looked down to see that her mother's eyes had focused, seeing her. Your words, Venli, a distant feminine voice said in her mind, are now accepted. The next chapter, we have the pursuer being killed and officially called the defeated one, which is kind of awesome. And then the horse, when Kaladin gets it, first off, when he gets it and he's just so kind of distracted and in awe that he's holding this thing that it says, I thought this was adorable. When it says he clutched the horse close to his chest, he was so amazed that he walked off and had to come running back to pay for what he'd taken. Kaladin's the cutest. I love Kaladin so much. And then when he finally decides, I wrote in my notes, Kaladin taking care of himself, because it says today Kaladin had another promise to keep. After all, he told Teft he would join these meetings and start taking care of himself. It's so beautiful. I feel like in the previous chats, I've talked about things that I didn't love or things that I felt were a little slow or moments for characters that I was frustrated with, things like that. And I've had some people get like pretty feisty about that. And I feel like people are going to be annoyed at how emotional I am over this last part. But I am very sorry for people that didn't love the end of this book the way I loved it, because I wish you could be me right now having all these emotions. I loved the end of this book. And then we have chapter 117, which is one of the most gorgeous chapters I feel like we have had. There's been so many wonderful moments throughout Stormlight Archive. I never expected this Eshonai scene to be one of my favorite scenes, but it is so beautiful. And just like Jaxlim and Venli being reunited, this moment when you find out that that Eshonai was given this last moment before death, it is so gorgeous. It's so beautiful, but it's also like it kind of hurts your heart a little bit. And then you get the stupid epilogue. Okay, so I knew this wasn't the case, but because this is the arc, I was like, is there a chance maybe that they just messed up and accidentally wrote the same scene almost twice? And I knew that's not what it was, but I was kind of in denial. That ending is phenomenal. This whole last part is so good. So good. But anyway, now that we are at the end of Rhythm of War, definitely let me know your favorite moments in this series. Let me know if this one ranks at the top for you, the bottom, somewhere in the middle. How did you like this book overall? But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.